Hello, Podcast Collective Consciousness. I hope all is well in your world. This is the Reconsider Simon podcast. In this audio space, I'll explore consciousness, ufology, high strangeness, the esoteric, spirituality, even the very essence of reality itself. Episode number 7, Journal 2. The Cheshire Cat, Brighton Underground Tunnels, Ormus, Dune and A.I. Welcome. So, episode number 7, Journal 2. This is the second journal that I'm doing. Just a mishmash of different things that are happening in my life, things that I've noticed. 7 for me has always been an incredibly mystic number. It's my birthday, 7th of July. And also, I weighed 7 pounds, 7 ounces. So yeah, 7 to me has always been quite a mystical number, quite special. So let's hope this is a good one. But as the title suggests, I'm going to be looking at the Cheshire Cat, symbology, spiritual nature of this Cheshire Cat. That's come up for me in terms of synchronicity. It's been very interesting. And then seamlessly, I'm going to segue into the Brighton Underground Tunnels. And there is a link, trust me. And also going to be looking at Ormus. It's quite mystical, life-giving substance called Ormus, which has remnants in ancient Egypt, also maybe being used in interstellar travel potentially. And I think it's actually maybe referenced in some of our sci-fi films as well. So yeah, going to look into that. But on previous episodes, I've discussed lots to do with Judy Jacker and some of the research of Fran Nixon as well. Still early days for me. But yeah, these are, well, Judy Jacker is a naturopath. And actually, I don't really know what Fran Nixon was, but I know Judy Jacker was an Australian naturopath and got very much into some of the things that Fran Nixon discovered about the human body and energies. And it's got some really exciting techniques. So yeah, I've been reading her book and some things have come up and I've been trying out some of her techniques and they've been really amazing. And then considering I'm on this healing journey, so I'm obviously trying to heal, and definitely one of her techniques was amazing. So yeah, going to talk about that briefly. I'm still sort of learning more, and yeah, it's what's strange is the fact that a lot of their research is out of print, so a lot of the kind of current books are really hard to find. And then plus, there's not a lot of information on the internet surrounding some of their work. It's actually quite hard to find. But I'm probably about a quarter way through one of Judy Jacker's book, which is called Healing with Earth Energies. I did have another one on order, specifically called The Vivaxis Connection. And that was on eBay and that was being imported from America. But the company I was buying it off I don't know whether it was a genuine book or not, but actually we ended up getting a refund from eBay. So yeah, that's kind of going on. But I'm quite keen to try and search out another copy. But they are expensive, and you're talking over about £100, $100 purchase these books because they are out of print, and obviously they're quite hard to find. So people are cashing in on the scarcity of these books, I think. But so far, a lot of what she's saying is that the human body, I mean, a lot of you know this anyway, but it's a very sensitive instrument and can be used to do quite amazing things. And so a lot of the techniques in using the body as a measuring instrument. And one of the techniques allows you to be able to test for negative and positive ions in the body, but then also within the external environment. And as we know, negative ions are good for the body. They're what you get from nature. If you go down to the beach, you'll receive negative ions. And the positive ions, which sounds like it's going to be good, but it's actually completely opposite. Positive ions are where, come from electronics, computers. These are detrimental to our health. What Judy Jacker teaches within the book is a type of form of muscle testing you might get with kinesiology. If you guys have been in kinesiology before, it involves muscle testing and you can test for various conditions, problems your body is having, but then also just testing for like dosages of homeopathic remedies or supplements. And it's a really powerful way to heal your body and discover kind of true information that's not distorted in any way. So once I learned this technique, I mean, I've been testing everywhere. I've been testing within, the house. I've been testing on areas of my body. What's been fascinating is the fact you can test specific areas of the body to sort of see if there are negative ions flowing there correctly, and then if there are any blockages. And very much so, if I find a blockage, it kind of correlates to some of the problems I'm having at the moment. So I've just been able to clear those areas, to unblock those areas, and it's definitely helped my healing, like 100%. But it's not only just your body and the external environment. I've used it to test the amount of positive ions within the environment. And then, if there's too many, obviously you can open a window and just help some of the negative ions come in, just like cleanse the room a bit from the technology that we're all kind of surrounded by these days. But I've also sort of used it to sort of test food as well. So I sort of test a bar of chocolate and there was like 0 negative ions coming out of it. So obviously not the greatest food to eat in the world. But then I tested like green tea and it had a good emanation of negative ions, which I found fascinating. And things like some of my spiritual tools, like the pendulums as well, tested those for negative ions, and it had a nice beneficial flow of negative ions coming out some of my pendulums. So that's good to know. But what's really strange, a few months ago, I was reading about the fact that you can print out the Om sign. This supposed to be the sound of the beginning of the universe. Om. That sound. And there's a Sanskrit symbol that goes with that, and you can print it out. So I printed it out on an A4 piece of paper, and I pinned one above where I slept, but also where I was working as well, on my monitor screen, in front of my monitor screen. And it's supposed to be a really good clearing symbol, to keep the area clean. So I did that, and but then through some of these techniques, which includes being able to discover foreign fields, I actually started to test the Om sign. I started to get like a foreign field vibe from it. So it wasn't like entirely positive. I don't know why, but I'm just going with what I was getting within my body in some of this muscle testing. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll take these symbols down. Maybe they're not helping at all. And ever since I took them down, my sleep has been so much better. I've been feeling so much better in myself as well. I mean, again, maybe there's no connection, but it feels like there is. It feels like I'm not denouncing the idea of the Om, but sometimes you get these sort of strange languages or Sanskrit, and obviously we don't really know what they mean and maybe what's attached to it. It's quite a controversial subject, but yeah, it's just what I've discovered like recently anyway. So first controversy, I've just announced the entire of the Sanskrit language, which has been around for thousands of years. Yeah, I mean, it could be quite complex. Maybe there's something, I don't know, it's attached to that particular sign on my wall rather than the overall symbol. It's strange, but there's definitely a correlation between me taking those signs down and me feeling a lot better. And, it's very accurate in measuring foreign field in particular areas of my body, but then also in my head as well. And I've suffered with brain fog for a number of years now, and I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. And what I have found, this energetic technique, which I've been doing every day, definitely has like helped clear that foreign field from my head. And what was really, really powerful is I actually had a huge headache the next day, the first time trying it. And very strange, very rarely that I get headaches. I haven't drunk alcohol for a while now, nothing to do with that. Kept hydrated. Yeah, so it's bizarre that I had this crushing headache. And all I can think is it's just the energy's flowing better through my brain. And that's why I was just getting these headaches. That's the only reason I can think I started to get them. So yeah, so far, some of the Judy Jacker's work, obviously based off a lot of Fran Nixon's work, really exciting. I got this feeling of excitement as soon as I kind of discovered some of this work. And yeah, I thought it was going to be important. It's turning out to be quite powerful. And I think it's got loads more techniques in there. I'm just getting into a part of the book where it starts to talk about receiving particular minerals and supplementation from earth energies, and how you can get that from the land rather than actually taking in supplementation or homeopathic remedies. So it all looks quite technical, but quite exciting. I've got that to come. But also within the book, talking about reading the effect of the tides on the human body and be able to literally measure whether it's high or low tide or in the middle using your body. So this is quite ninja black belt level muscle testing. Yeah, it's quite amazing, really. So there'll be more to come on that once I've got my head around it. But in terms of what other things that I've been doing, I've been exploring, been going outside, been walking. And obviously I'm in Chester still. And the main river, well, the only river that flows through Chester is called the River Dee. So yeah, it kind of splits the town in half, and it flows just outside of the Roman walls. And I've like sort of been on the river quite a lot as a child. I used to go to a sailing club there, so I know it pretty well. But never actually kind of walked that far down. So I've made it a little bit of a challenge to sort of keep walking as far as possible. So I keep doing it in segments. And then a couple of weeks ago, I decided to walk from a particular village and then as far as I could go for about 2 or 3 hours. It was pouring with rain, and so it wasn't the best conditions. And it's very muddy, so I had my welly boots on. But what was crazy is the fact that you walk past the Eton Estate, and the Eton Estate is basically the house where the Duke of Westminster lives, and it's massive, it's huge. I didn't quite realise how big it was. And I've always known about the Duke of Westminster. He's always there, kind of hanging in the background. There's an area called Duke's Drive you can walk down, which used to be the former drive to the main stately home, but now they've changed the entrance to somewhere else. But now the former Duke's Drive is now like a public footpath. You can go down there. It's quite nice, got sort of trees down it and stuff. And then part of his estate actually kind of the river cuts through it, basically. So you can kind of walk through, and it goes on and on and on as you walk down. You just realize how big this place is. And the Duke of Westminster, if you're not aware, he owns vast swathes of land across the United Kingdom, some of the world's wealthiest areas of London, places like Mayfair. He owns a lot of the land underneath there, but just loads of areas around the United Kingdom, but then also areas of Chester as well. I think he sold some areas off for fund redevelopment of Liverpool. So yeah, quite a wealthy man. His son took over only due to the fact that he died. I think that's quite a few years ago now, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Duke of Westminster died, and his son's then taken over the title. And he's inherited a lot of money, like billions. And anyway, but their whole estate is humongous. And it gets me thinking, because sometimes, a lot of the time, these stately homes or big mansions are set in places that are quite energetic. There's earth energies there, and, there seems to be a correlation sometimes between the two. And a dead giveaway is you can look down his new driveway from the road, and there's a humongous obelisk right in the center of his driveway. And these are very Freemasonic instruments. They're found all over the place. You can get massive obelisks. They're basically the stone points, and you get them in Washington DC. Humongous one there. There's a massive one in London. It's got Egyptian hieroglyphics on it. So they always feature quite prominently in capital cities. This one's not as big as that, but yeah, it's just quite suspect, the fact that it's placed there. And I don't know totally what they're used for. I guess there are loads of different theories. But yeah, I just find it quite interesting that it's placed there. And that area just feels nice energetically. It's a pleasant place to walk around. And yeah, it's similar to Sussex where I was before. You tended to get quite energetic areas, and there would be quite a large stately home there as well. And with the Duke of Westminster as well, a lot of these stately homes, sometimes they have to open it up to the public so that they can afford to keep it going, because they don't have, they're not as rich as they used to be where they can have a complete estate to themselves. They have to allow the general public to come in to sort of keep the maintenance of the place going. But these guys don't need that at all. They have enough money to have this huge estate all to themselves. So at some point, I'm going to do more work and, research, and maybe take my dowsing rods down there to see what I can find. So yeah, watch this space on that one as well. But yeah, moving on to interesting synchronicities, things I see it as like feedback from reality, weird stuff that's happened, quite exciting stuff. But let's do the Cheshire Cat. I'm sure all of you heard of the Cheshire Cat. I was just thinking about the Cheshire Cat once. I was going on a walk with my daily exercise, just sort of thinking about reality. As I think about reality a lot, how strange it is, what it means. There's some of these messages we get, how to decode it. And yeah, just started to think about the Cheshire Cat. And I was started to walk along Chester walls, and there's a section of the wall that goes alongside the river, right near the weir. And just strangely just came across like a clay figure Cheshire Cat that had actually been cemented into one of the walls. And there was quite a tall wall next to a home, and it had been cemented in there, so you could kind of see it from the wall. So the Cheshire Cat, one of the big redeeming features, obviously, is the humongous grin. It's got a really big, very unlike cat-like grin. It's more like a human grin, a smile. And so that's the big feature. And then I didn't think anything of it, really. I just carried on with my walk. But then subsequently, days afterwards, I was on Facebook, and then someone posted a picture. She's like, they were requesting where that particular Cheshire Cat was on the Roman walls because they couldn't find it. And I was like, oh, that's strange, because I literally stumbled across that the other day. So, just interesting that it popped up again in my reality. And then literally a few days afterwards, someone mentioned the Cheshire Cat in podcasts, and it kept happening for a number of days. The Cheshire Cat just kept coming up. And people, one big thing about our reality is there are no coincidences. So yeah, I was taking this as a big message from the universe. So yeah, I just started to read everything to do with the Cheshire Cat. Just did a little bit of research to see what it meant. The Cheshire Cat features very prominently in Alice's Adventure in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I always thought he invented the character, but not. He popularized it, I think you'd say, because it does feature in other forms of literature earlier on, so it can be found way before those books. But then also can be found in various sculptures in places. I think there was some pub that had it on the outside of their building. So yeah, Cheshire Cat's being featured in other places apart from literature. But I guess you would ask, why a Cheshire Cat? Why a big grinning Cheshire Cat? What does that mean? I think the most likely reason for it would be the fact that Cheshire has a lot of dairy, a lot of cows producing milk. So the idea would be, if you were a cat that kind of was on a particular farm, you would be smiling because you'd have freely available milk to drink. So you'd be very happy and therefore have this humongous grin. So I think that probably is the reason why. What does Wikipedia have to say on the subject? Well, I pulled out one of the paragraphs. It gives a good explanation. It says, the Cheshire Cat is now largely identified with the character of the same name in Lewis Carroll's 1865 novel, Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. Alice first encounters the Cheshire Cat at the Duchess's house in her kitchen, and later on the branches of a tree, where it appears and disappears at will, and engages Alice in amusing but sometimes perplexing conversation. The cat sometimes raises philosophical points that annoy or baffle Alice, but appears to cheer her up when it appears suddenly at the Queen of Hearts croquet field, and when sentenced to death, baffles everyone by having made its head appear without its body, sparking a debate between the executioner and the King and Queen of Hearts whether a disembodied head can indeed be beheaded. At one point, the cat disappears gradually until nothing is left but its grin, prompting Alice to remark that she has often seen a cat without a grin, but never a grin without a cat. It's all very surreal for that time, considering it's 1865. Some of the visuals and the concepts are very, very strange, very surreal, very kind of abstract. I've never actually read the book, but maybe I should do at some point. But yeah, there's a great website that I came across called Meaning Symbolism, and they had a good page on the Cheshire Cat symbolism. So here's what they say about their understanding of the Cheshire Cat. In the article, they start to explain that Cheshire Cat is very confusing and difficult to understand, talks in riddles, and then disappears and reappears without explanation. So he's a very enigmatic sort of character. And it turns out that maybe the Cheshire Cat really is the guide in Wonderland. And that makes him quite feared in his role, because he has this power, because he sort of understands the reality of Wonderland, where everyone else within there, they're just kind of reacting to what's going on around them. Cheshire Cat is like a mystical seer, a shaman who just travels between different realities and makes people laugh and then disappears into thin air, brings levity to situations. And he represents a really powerful aspect of laughter, of funness, and just creates temporary escape for people, escaping from their everyday troubles of life and that reality. And there's points where Alice just really struggles to make sense of her surroundings, just starts to create real disharmony within her. And the cat sort of says, we're all mad round here, just bringing the absurdity about the reality that we're all in, and just not to take it too seriously. And Wonderland is very much a world of make-believe, and nothing is quite as it seems. And so you can take a lot of parallels with our own reality. It feels like that sometimes. Sometimes it feels like we're in Wonderland. He's very much a character, symbol of rebellion, of disobedience with the reality. He's a trickster guide that goes through this reality. He moves between different realms, different realities. And again, just in terms of my own life, just the struggles and fears and irritation and anger of things that are going around me, just trying to make sense of things. Maybe we should just think more like the Cheshire Cat, not to take things seriously and just to realize the game that we're all in. So because of all of this, really, I've just started to view the Cheshire Cat and it popping into my reality as a guide, as a protector, and to help me as I travel through unfamiliar territory, and just to find laughter and to find fun and ridiculousness in all these situations, even when things can seem a little bit hopeless. Just to reinforce some of those ideas, I was listening to Dolores Cannon. She's a hypnotist. She's dead now, unfortunately, but she created a technique called the QHHT, which stands for Quantum Hypnosis Healing Technique. And it involves a lot of regression and people discovering their past lives. And what she found was that past lives are not only happening in terms of reincarnations on this earth, but beings were coming from other galactic areas, other places, from other planets, etc. And there's a lot of information that kind of garnered through this hypnosis technique, where she was able to understand the reality more and what it means to be here. And she discovered and sort of understood that, Earth is a school, and we're here to learn how to create, how to manipulate energy. So in many ways, the Cheshire Cat reminds me as a spiritual totem for me, that helps to remind me of that, not to take things too seriously, and that we're all here to kind of co-create, and we're just learning to harness those powers at the moment, potentially. I think, again, the Cheshire Cat is just a reminder not to slip into that victim mindset, that victim mentality. And it's quite easy at the moment because there's so many crazy things going on in the world. And, I haven't had the best last few years personally as well. So, yeah, it's been a challenge. So, yeah, again, Cheshire Cat just reminds you not to take things too seriously. Play the game, I guess. Talking about making light out of the dark. Gonna go a little bit conspiratorial now, going fully dark. But the idea, the conspiracy minded, that Alice in Wonderland, because of its surreal atmosphere and landscape, was used in a thing called MK Ultra, which is a US covert mind control experiments that happened between 1950s and the 1970s, roughly, and involved what is called mnemonic programming. And the whole idea was to disassociate the victim from its reality. And once you disassociate people from themselves and to completely shatter their consciousness, it enables them to, the controllers, to build these people up and build alternative personalities within these people's minds called alters. And potentially, apparently, it says on the internet, obviously the internet is always true, that Alice in Wonderland and things like the Wizard of Oz, because of its surreal nature, was very much used in the programming process. It was used to trigger altered states of mind and, basically twisted quite an innocent story into something quite dark. But I'm trying not to be too conspiratorial on this podcast. I'm trying to keep it light as much as possible. But yeah, if you want to learn more about MK, I'm sure you know about it already, but if you want to learn more, find more on the internet, yeah, you'll be able to find it. There's quite a lot of stuff out there. And it's been, officially confirmed. I think it's Bill Clinton apologized for some of the experimentation that was done. But they always say, we don't do that sort of thing now. But of course, they're probably lying. But is there a way for me to connect Alice in Wonderland with Brighton underground tunnels? Yes, there is, sir and madam. Yeah, so basically, Lewis Carroll, who is not a real person, that's a pen name. The guy's real name was Charles Ludwig Dodgson. I never knew that. He was a poet, author, and mathematician. But strangely, he used to spend a lot of time in Brighton, in Sussex, and he would spend living residentially in Sussex Square, which is an amazing area. It's in an area called Kent Town, so it's east side of the seafront. And yeah, really opulent residential area. It's like a sort of a half circle, and has this private garden in the middle. And one side is Lewis Crescent, the other side is Sussex Square. Various celebrities have lived there at one point or another. I think, I'm trying to think who's been there. Nick Cave, I think. Yeah, lots of people, but including Lewis Carroll. But you have this very opulent crescent shape. So with Lewis Crescent, Sussex Square, with a private garden in the middle. And the only people that get access to this garden are the people who actually live in those two streets. And yeah, I've known people that have lived there various occasions, just rented, and you get given a key to enter this garden. It's very nicely manicured, very nice, small oasis. But it actually has a tunnel that goes directly from the garden underneath the seafront road and brings you out onto the seafront. And apparently, Lewis Carroll was fascinated by this tunnel. So people say because of Lewis Carroll living in this particular residential area and this tunnel that goes underneath the seafront, and the fact he liked this so much, that this kind of fed into the idea of Alice falling down the rabbit hole, and this facilitated, this inspired him with this whole idea, this whole concept. So that's one tunnel we know about. But after living in Brighton for a few years, you realise, you get to understand that actually Brighton has a lot of tunnels underneath it. And there are some ones that are well known, but I mean, how many are there that people don't know about? And it seems like the whole city has this quite deep matrix of various tunnels that go underneath to various locations. One of the famous ones is to do with the Prince Regent, the pavilion, the big pavilion in the centre. It's very much inspired by kind of Indian Moorish architecture. It's got these big domes there. Anyway, this Prince Regent was a very opulent guy, used to eat a lot, used to drink a lot. He had a tunnel that connected his palace with this area called the Brighton Dome. Brighton Dome now is a cultural space. It's used as a theatre, as a concert hall for comedies and etc. But it used to be where he had his horses, and he had a tunnel built so it connected his home with, where his horses were. So he didn't have to go outside and be seen by the public. So that's another tunnel. I forgot about the dates, but the Prince Regent was around 1811. But later on, he became King George IV around about 1820. But yeah, he created one of the big iconic structures of Brighton, which is the Brighton Pavilion. But then you start to hear rumours of tunnels in all sorts of strange directions. When I was a student, I swear blind that I remember someone telling me, or read it somewhere, about there was a tunnel that connected Brighton Station, which is right in the centre of the town, to Kemp Town, which obviously we were talking about before with Sussex Square and Lewis Crescent. Again, I've never had access to that. But yeah, there's tunnels all over the place. And what is strange is the fact that you can walk along the seafront, and they're on the seafront wall. They have these humongous, like, metal doors, the kind of vaulted doors. And they look insane. I mean, you could, by all means, if you're going to have an entranceway into some of these tunnels from the seafront, it would make sense to, make it secure, have a metal door. But these doors are crazy. They look like it's for a bank vault. It looks way over the top, which is strange in itself. It's like they really don't want people to go in there. I don't know why. What are they hiding? Again, maybe I'm just being overly conspiratorial. But sometimes every year or so, in the UK, the political parties here, they'll have these conferences, and they tend to be like seafront locations. Sometimes it might be in Blackpool, and Brighton is quite a popular spot because it's quite close to London. It's like an hour on the train. And so, sometimes, the Labour Party might have a political conference here on the seafront, and they'll take over the town. There's a big conference hall on the seafront called the Brighton Centre. They'll have a lot of talks there and conferences, sort of main speech by some of the leaders of the political parties there. And obviously there's some quite big hotels in the seafront, so a lot of the politicians tend to stay in those hotels. And what happens over that period is they have to secure the entire area. And there was a particular time I remember when I was a student, when Tony Blair was in power, and they had one of their political rallies down in Brighton, and the whole place went on lockdown. There was like riot vans everywhere, police with big machine guns, and obviously bearing in mind it's very unusual for UK police to have guns, so it stuck out like a sore thumb. But they spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds apparently securing some of these tunnels to make sure that people didn't place bombs underneath there, terrorism, etc. Some of the tunnels very occasionally in a year are open to the public. This tends to happen over May time. There's an event called the Brighton Festival, which is a massive cultural event. It includes street theatre, comedy, various other cultural events. But as part of that, you can buy tickets and you can basically have a guided tour which shows you some of these tunnels. But I don't think it shows you the whole network, and I think there's quite a lot going on. So it's probably very selective in what you're able to see. And just a side thought, I mean, Brighton is obviously an amazing, very creative, very thoughtful, very tolerant place to be. But it does have, it's like with most places, I think when there's a lot of light there, a lot of great things, is obviously it creates a sort of underbelly, it attracts some darkness as well. And yeah, I just find it strange. I didn't realize this before, that the Tavistock Institute has a large foothold in Sussex University. Again, I'm getting quite conspiratorial. I can't help myself. But I haven't read it yet. It's a book called The Tavistock Institute by Daniel Esgelin. And yeah, I haven't actually really read it yet, but the Tavistock Institute is interesting because it talks about how potentially it seeds a lot of ideas into society. You know, sometimes your belief system, you maybe think organically you've created your own belief system, but how much of that is true? You know, how much has that been planted by certain politics or media or music you listen to that may have been created by someone else? And people say that sometimes the Tavistock Institute is a big manipulator and influencer of society, you know, potentially creating a lot of the ideas, pushing us in a certain direction. So I'm just putting it out there, you know, Tavistock Institute, if you go on their website, it all seems very benign and fine and they're helping the planet and all the rest of it. But, you know, quite suspicious that organization. Again, I haven't read hugely into it, but it just gives you this idea that, okay, Brighton has all these brilliant ideas, this level of tolerance and acceptance. But, you know, again, there's this dark underbelly. So maybe not take the tunnels at face value. Maybe there's something a bit weird going on, why they keep so many of these tunnels hidden from the public. I mean, you could say, yeah, you're being a bit paranoid and you're being too imaginative and getting ahead of yourself. But, you know, there is little snippets of information just come into my reality sometimes. It just makes me think twice about the tunnels and potentially what's going underneath our feet in Brighton. One particular interesting story is coming from a guy called Michael Prince. And he was interviewed by an organization called the Basis Project. I think you can find them on YouTube, but they tend to be more on alternative streaming platforms like Rumble and Odyssey these days. But the Basis Project is headed up by a guy called Miles Johnson, and he's based in Wiltshire. And he's a long-time researcher, a lot to do with underground bases and UFOs and high strangers in general in the United Kingdom. But anyway, he's sort of made quite a lot of contact with various individuals, one guy called Michael Prince. And they talked a lot about when he was a child being basically mind controlled through this thing called Project Mannequin. So this all starts to sound very, very, very similar to the MK Ultra thing. You know, Michael Prince, I'm not even sure that's his real name actually, but is describing similar type of programming, but happening at a very young age for kind of operations as he gets older. Because you could ask, like, why would you want to mind control someone? But you got to ask the question, you know, the perfect assassin is someone who can't remember what they did. You know, so they could take a lie detector test, and because it's stored in a different part of their personality, their everyday consciousness isn't aware potentially of the crimes that they've done. So it's the perfect cover. So this is why potentially maybe covert organizations are using these techniques. But what does this have to do with Brighton? But as it turns out, he claims that Michael Prince spent a lot of time in Brighton. And also there's another individual who comes into the story called Max Spears, who he became quite well known for being more of a UFO researcher, an occult researcher. And yeah, he was sort of gathering pace in terms of recognition. And then he had a strange situation where he unfortunately died in Poland, I think it was, and was vomiting black liquid. It was actually posted all on the mainstream news at the time. It was very strange that they all started to report how this UFO researcher had died very suddenly and under mysterious circumstances. As it turns out, I was watching one interview where they were both interviewed together on Project Camelot by Kerry Cassidy, and they were saying how they found that they both sometimes ended up in the same places in the world, quite unconsciously. They didn't plan it together. Like they found they were in the same place at the same time. They were in Houston, Texas. But they spent both of them a lot of time in Brighton as children. And I think it was Max Spears. This is the thing. There was a video specifically who was talking about some of this stuff, and I can't seem to find it. I don't know whether it's been taken away from YouTube, because I know the Basis Project were taken off YouTube for a while. So it might have been deleted during that purge. But I definitely remember this. And he was talking about there being underground facilities underneath one of the leisure centres. And I can't remember which one. It's either the Prince Regent swimming pool or the King Alfred, which is in Hove. Yeah, because this is basically, he was taken into a militarized facility under one of these swimming pools. And then I was like, at the time when I was listening to it, I was like, that's a bit far-fetched. I was kind of amazing story, but wasn't totally believing it, because I think it's difficult these days to kind of completely believe everything. You've got to take, be skeptical of most things, but not discount it, obviously. But, I've always had this snippet of information in my head where, this guy is talking about underground facilities under one of the swimming pools, and I thought nothing of it. I mean, it's really, really hard to imagine, this very benign council building where people are going to swim or, go to the gym, having this, secret militarized underground layer where they're programming children to become super assassins. I mean, yeah, it sounds far out there. But recently, I came across this story which piqued my interest. And it was in one of the local, well, not in the newspaper anymore, but it's all online now. But it's from the Argus, which is the newspaper of that area. So this article was released on the 11th of January of this year, 2024. And it's called Urban Explorer Reveals Long Forgotten Rooms Beneath Hove's King Alfred. I think Urban Explorer is one of those like YouTubers or adventure people that basically find hidden tunnels or disused areas and sort of film it and take photographs. I mean, YouTube's full of them. They're quite interesting, some of them. So yeah, it's a similar person who's done that. And in King Alfred's leisure centre, that's based in Hove. So it's the kind of, Brighton and Hove is like one combined city now. But Hove is kind of the west of Brighton. And yeah, King Alfred swimming pool is right on the seafront. It's quite an old, decrepit building now, not in terms of like Victorian, but more of like a 1950s, 1960s. And it's seen better days. But I didn't realise this, but it's got a massive facility underneath it, which they used to have a 22-lane bowling alley, laser tag arena, bar, and indoor bowls club. And bearing in mind, I've been living in Brighton on and off since probably about 1999, so quite a while. I wasn't even aware of this place. I think it was actually even open when I started at university in Brighton, but I just never went down there, never went to King Alfred's around that time. And then I think it probably closed shortly after, around about the start of the millennium, maybe. But it's a fact, if you see the pictures, I mean, as you know, commercial bowling alleys tend to be quite large places, quite large buildings, and this is all underground. And you go, okay, that's interesting. What has that got to do with brainwashing children? Well, let me say. So I got the original date wrong. It actually was built in 1939. So the King Alfred opened in 1939, and it was originally known as Hove Marina and played an important part in training some 22,500 Royal Navy officers during the Second World War. So as it turns out, it originally was a military installation. So if we're connecting dots, and Michael Prince and Max Beers are telling the truth, and I think actually there's a lot of aspects of their story that is really interesting, probably quite credible. This was originally a military installation way before it was a public swimming and baths or leisure centre or bowling alley. It had military facility there, and it was underground as well. So it's not too far a stretch from the imagination that maybe, just maybe, the military kept certain areas of this facility still for military use, but then converted the rest of it for public access. Still a crazy story, but yeah, some dots start to connect. Really, really crazy. And again, I'll keep repeating this on various other podcast episodes and other aspects of my work. I talk about military bases being in really energetic places in the United Kingdom. This is probably the same for other areas of the world. In America, definitely has loads of facilities and energetic places in California, same with Australia. There's a lot of military activity around Wiltshire. Obviously, this is the home of, Avebury Stone Circle and Stonehenge, and there's a large military facility there. So Brighton being Brighton and being quite energetic, it would make sense that the military would also be there as well. So yeah, falling deep down the rabbit hole now. I mean, even on Brighton seafront, or Hove seafront itself, a little further down into town towards Brighton from King Alfred's Leisure Centre, there is a long barrow, a burial ground where people have said there's a chieftain that's been buried there. There's some legends that say it's actually King Arthur, more kind of out there stories. But again, it just adds credence to the idea that that area is really energetic. And whilst researching this article, I was doing a little bit of Googling, trying to find bits and bobs on the internet about Brighton tunnels. And I did come across this quite old article that was written, well, it's not that old, 2017, and the Brighton Journal, and it says someone has created a map of Brighton's secret underground tunnels, and just goes on to describe, apparently this guy created a map of Brighton's secret underground tunnels, and he's been joined by a group of people who are all enthusiasts, and they've started to map the city's underground tunnels and vaults, and they're just self-described as enthusiastic explorers that have been researching Brighton's long-lost underground world. Yeah, as it turns out, he had an entire website with a mapping system of all these like underground tunnels. And he was originally inspired because he was working in a shop in Brighton a long time, quite a few decades ago. And they discovered in the cellar like a door into this underground vault, this underground tunnel. And that just piqued his interest into this whole idea of tunnels of Brighton. So later on, he started to devise this map. But I can't find that map anywhere. It's not on the internet anymore. That website's now defunct. It's not working. So yeah, that's maybe strange in itself. Maybe it's not. Maybe just couldn't be bothered to pay for the hosting anymore. But it's strange that you can't find that map anywhere anymore. Maybe they were warned off it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too conspiratorial. Unfortunately, I can't segue into this next topic. So it's going to be a real change of gear from the underground. We're going to the overgrounds, maybe beyond, into the galaxy, into a fictitious planet called Dune. So yeah, epic film series has been recently released, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Excellent director. He's created some other films that I've really enjoyed, like Arrival, which is a brilliant, positive spin on kind of extraterrestrial contact. We need more of those films because a lot of the time those films tend to be very fearful. Arrival, I think it's got a really positive message behind it. It's great. I really recommend it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, Dune. I never really read the books. I originally remember seeing the film. Who's that director who did it? Surreal director. David Lynch, that's it. But yeah, that film was good, but it's a little bit gruesome in parts. So I don't really like watching it again. But being a big fan of Denis Villeneuve's reinterpretation of Dune, yeah, I found the first one amazing. I remember seeing it multiple times at the cinema. Love the visuals, love everything about it. So I haven't seen the second one yet. Obviously, that's been released probably about a week, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, gunning to go and see it quite soon. So I will. But yeah, anyway, it's just got me thinking about to do with AI, I guess. And this is another mantra I keep repeating on some of these episodes, some of the videos that I've done and podcasts, where I get really fascinated by sci-fi and the kind of the writers, the creators of these really complex universes, and the evidence that maybe they're channeling some of this information that's not coming from them. But it's also maybe written from experience, not obviously from this lifetime, but from other lifetimes maybe they've had in other star systems, other realities, and it's just bleeding into this reality, trying to level up humanity to start to kind of understand quite complex subjects of, a larger galactic whole, and it not just being humans on a planet, that there's more life outside of the star system. And I think there's been a lot of evidence to, support that. There's been various remote viewings on some of these sci-fi writers about where these ideas have come from. I've referenced it before, but the Farsight Institute did some remote viewing on, the guy who created Star Wars, and discovered that essentially he's telling the story of past lifetimes that he's had in other galaxies that involved some of this great galactic wars that you sort of see in Star Wars. So I think the same could be said for Frank Herbert. Again, I've never really read. I don't really read fiction. I tend to read more like non-fiction, conspiracy, spirituality, weird books. Yeah, so it doesn't tend to be. Yeah, I don't tend to read fiction that often. But yeah, I think the sci-fi writing is really important. And I'm a massive fan of sci-fi films when they come out, when they're good. Really, really inspired by them. This Dune film is one of them, and it's had loads of interesting ideas come up for me in terms of like AI and how, Frank Herbert factored in AI in the Dune universe. But an even more fascinating component of the Dune universe is spice, which is one of the main aspects of the story. And it's the harvesting of this spice. This spice is a very mystical element and enables them to travel through great distances in space. It's very much entangled with their space technology. But it also is a very spiritual substance in terms of when it's ingested. It's a psychotropic, so it's very much a psychedelic, spiritual, enables the user to kind of reach higher levels of consciousness. So the inhabitants of Dune, called the Fremen, they revere this substance in a very spiritual way. But then obviously the rest of, that known galaxy, which is under the Emperor's control, the Imperium, they're mining spice for their technology, for their spaceships. So this is where that kind of like political struggle then kind of comes into the story of Dune. So this is where sci-fi really starts to bleed into our own reality, because potentially there is a similar substance to spice that can be found in our own reality. And it's monotonic gold. A lot of people might have heard of that, but it's also known by the name of Ormus, which again is a real life substance and was discovered by a guy called David Hudson, who was a farmer in 1975. And he discovered this strange white material in the soil. And he grew cotton. And he discovered that if it was actually exposed to sunlight, it would explode in the sunlight. He was quite baffled by this substance, this white substance that he found in his farmland. So he took it to various universities to be tested. And they sort of found normal levels of different elements in terms of gold, silver, iron, and aluminium, all trace elements. But apparently 98% of what was found in this Ormus was completely, it was not known. They couldn't really add a label to it. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what the substance was. 2% they could identify, but the other 98% was this strange kind of dark matter. So David Hudson actually went on to name this, they called it Ormus, which stands for orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. I mean, David Hudson is quite a wealthy farmer, so he was able to fund a lot of the research himself. And I know he went through various universities and academic places across America. The last time I heard from him, I think he was having a lot of research done and investment and from various other kind of influencers and investors in China. And so that was kind of where the story ends for me. I don't quite know what's happened after that. He pops in and out of the public arena occasionally. It appears because there are Ormus conferences, and there's quite a large community of people that make their own Ormus. And there are various techniques to be able to make it, but I don't think it's actually the true, genuine article that you would discover in the ground. I think it's quite a hard substance to find. Obviously, David Hudson was able to find it somehow in his farmland in Arizona, so I would guess maybe you get it naturally there, maybe. But there's a lot of parallels with what the Egyptians had, and they had this substance that they used to eat, and it'd be only the pharaohs or the leadership. They would eat this substance and it would give them spiritual, godlike powers, but it wasn't available to normal people. And in terms of like some of the testing that David Hudson did, what they discovered that within this substance, they would heat it up and some of the elements would basically phase out of this reality. They'd actually kind of move into a different dimension and it couldn't be found anymore. But then when it cooled down, these substances would then come back into this reality. They would phase back in. So this is kind of true alchemy. This is not supposed to exist, on mainstream opinion. But this substance kind of bucks all of those ideas, those scientific ideas that alchemy doesn't exist. You've got this substance that seems to be able to travel dimensionally. And very synchronistically, as I was writing and researching and thinking ideas to do with this podcast and to do with Ormus, I was just randomly listening when I was working on my day job. I was listening to a talk between Regina Meredith and a lady called Sarah Breskman. And she's, like I mentioned, Dolores Cannon with the QHHT. She's actually a hypnotherapist that trained under Dolores Cannon, so she's a protege of her. And so she does exactly the same kind of work. She's like regressing clients and discovering about their past lives, but larger past lives, not just on Earth, but these galactic past lives, on other planets or, who are incarnated from energy beings. So quite fantastical information. But as it turns out, during this talk, Sarah was talking about she was organised a trip to Egypt because she'd never been there before. And she was discovering a lot of information was coming through her clients specifically to do with Egypt before she went. So it was like some kind of force knew she was going to go there, but was then just deciphering this information. It was just kind of imparting information to do with Egypt to Sarah. And then what she discovered, that one of her clients started to talk about Egypt and this thing called the monotonic gold. And it sounded very similar to Ormus and what David Hudson discovered. And this client was saying this very spiritual substance was kept in a gold urn underneath the Sphinx. And it supercharged the soul. It gave, again, people sort of godlike spiritual powers and gave them like deep, meaning and deep answers coming from within. Because this entity was coming through one of their clients was saying, all your answers, they're not coming from the external, they're coming from within. And this monotonic goal, this Ormus, basically supercharges that whole process. So yeah, it was just really crazy. Just right in the midst of me researching this, that small bit of information kind of came up during this interview. And that interview's on Gaia now. Gaia is like a sort of spiritual, conspiratorial streaming service. Sometimes I dip in every now and again. So yeah, I'll put the link in the description. But yeah, really wild that information came up as I was doing this. But this monotonic gold is almost, I've also had, monotonic gold in a liquid form, and, definitely gives a lot of clarity in your mind. It's supposed to be really good, antibacterial as well. It has loads of beneficial properties to the body, human body. But I just started to think, what's happening? Gold is a really amazing conductor. These are just some of the ideas that I've thought of. I always remember when I used to have kind of a big stereo system, you'd have separate bits, you'd have a separate amplifier, separate CD player, and a separate sort of tape deck. And I had these big speakers, and you could buy kind of high quality, connecting wires, and they'd have gold tips, because gold is supposed to be a really better connectivity. You get a better sound going through it because of the connectivity. Just this a really good conductor. It made me start to think, maybe when you're ingesting this gold substance into your body, it's just making your body a really amazing superconductor. You're able to absorb all these beneficial energies from the universe, that gives you all these answers, gives you this super spiritual powers, just because you're vibrating like this spiritual gold aerial, I guess. But again, going back to David Hudson, he did say Ormus is in everything. It's in food, it's in the air, so you can't avoid it. But it's really lacking in our modern foods. Obviously, a lot of the foods we get from the supermarkets, they're mass produced in soils that are really depleted. Unfortunately, we're using sort of increasing levels of chemicals. They're being strangely genetically engineered on, unimaginable levels. So yeah, the kind of food we're eating is like less and less nutritious and more weak. So it would make sense that we're not getting less and less Ormus into our bodies as well. So that's a problem. And again, this Ormus helps with detoxification, cellular rejuvenation, healing of DNA, and just generally increasing your spirituality and improving your brain function to massive levels. So I just found, with this substance spice Ormus, there just seems to be so many connections, similarities. And again, going back to the idea of these sci-fi ideas, maybe channeled information, or, coming from their own reincarnation process. They had experiences on other dimensions, other planets, where, they're using this substance. And in particular, in the original Dune film in 1984 by David Lynch, there's a bit of the film where the princess, the daughter of the overarching emperor, she sort of comes on the screen. She says, "The spice extends life. The spice expands consciousness. The spice is vital to space travel." Now, just sounds so similar to Ormus. We actually haven't spoken about Ormus and monatomic gold in terms of space travel. And actually, there is evidence for that as well, let me tell you. So, Alec Newald, he's a contactee. I read his book quite a few years ago, so the story's quite misty in my mind. But the book's called Co-Evolution. And it's the story of a man taken for 10 days to an extraterrestrial civilization. Now, he's from New Zealand. I think he was actually a second-hand car salesman. And he was actually traveling between 2 points in New Zealand, a very long car journey. And it was only later that he discovered that he'd had missing time, and he was actually been away for 10 days. But he claimed he was taken onto a craft, and he was actually, in a different body. He wasn't in his same sort of human form. But they gave him this substance to eat or drink. I can't quite remember. But basically, this substance that he ate enabled his body then to travel interdimensionally. And also the beings on this craft, they were saying that it was also intrinsically the same substance that was used within space travel. So it was very important for both sides, biologically for the body to be able to handle interdimensional travel, but it's also very much an element of the craft itself as well. So again, you can see the parallels between spice and Ormus and this substance that this guy's talking about. It's a fantastical story. He was a car salesman. He's not the sort of person, as I mentioned, to really be talking about the abduction story. So it kind of makes the story even more credible because of who he is, really. But yeah, just so many parallels between what he was writing in terms of the space travel, the interdimensional travel, and this substance. And as it turns out, these beings that took him to this other planet, they were all connected because originally he was like, they're his star family essentially. So he's had reincarnations within this society before, so they're all kind of connected. But continuing on with the Dune universe, and a really powerful aspect of that society and what's going on is the whole AI conversation. Obviously, that's become really prevalent at the moment. All these AI tools are coming online. It's really going to completely change the society. And I've got to admit, there's a lot of fear for me in like AI. I can see its power. I've used a lot of the tools. They are amazing, but concerned about who's wielding that technology at the moment, what that means. But there's a quote written by Frank Herbert, which I saw, I found really prophetic, which was, once men turned their thinking over to the machines in the hope that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. Frank Herbert, Dune. So yeah, I think that's a really, really powerful statement, really powerful quote. And again, the sci-fi universe and how it sort of tackles all these future technologies and future situations that humanity is going to now have to tackle with. A lot of these concepts have been discussed and talked about within sci-fi for years, for decades. So I think we have all these consumer AI tools kind of coming out. For me, I think there are probably a lot more powerful tools, AI tools within the covert sphere. These AIs probably been around for a long time. It's just that we just haven't really heard about it, and it's only recently, normal people started to get access to those tools. So that's always got to be in your mind. I think that's got to be the forefront of your mind, that it's just not AI in the consumer sphere. There's other AI, I think, that's hidden away from us. It sort of ties into an article that I'm writing at the moment about, obviously I work in the creative sector as my day job. And, I start to think, all creativity always has like a human operator, whether you're drawing a simple pencil drawing or painting a landscape, or you're creating a 3D character on a computer. It's always had a human operator. It's always come from a human mind. It's basically like a human transmission of creativity. That person is transmitting their own thoughts, ideas, inspirations, love, whatever, into the world. And, other people can kind of connect with that. And, I'm doing a lot of work within remote viewing recently, of sort of practicing my remote viewing skills. And part of that whole process is you create little ideograms, you create little sketches. And the whole idea of it is you get your coordinates and then you try and sketch, whether it be a subject or a building or a mountain. And what comes from it is you're basically trying to bypass the thinking mind. You're just, these little sketches enable you to bypass the monkey thinking mind and then get to the core aspect of what those coordinates are pointing towards. And then with that ideogram, that small sketch, you can kind of feel into it. It's really strange. You can feel into it with the pen. So say if you've drawn a little mountain, you can then put your pen on that little mountain sketch. And then you can start to visualize some of the aspects of it, like the texture of maybe it's very kind of hard. Maybe it's lots of rocks on it. And maybe they're grey rocks. So you start to get all these other metadata kind of coming through. And it's all coming through this little drawing. It's really bizarre. But it just goes to show, like, how symbols or drawings, they can be attached to real locations or real people's consciousness. And I think that's really important, how you have these real human connections between creative work, whether you're watching an animated film or you're looking at a painting, it's sort of a portal, put a creative portal to these other people that kind of created that. And my real concern is now with AI is that you're creating all this creative work, especially the new tools that have come out recently called Sora, which is text-based prompt where you're able just to type out a paragraph and it creates these photorealistic videos that are really indistinguishable from normal reality. Whereas before it was really obvious when you could see AI video. Now it's like really difficult. But it's like you're losing that human connection at the other end. What does that mean for our consciousness? Before we were so used to connecting to each other through this creative work, through this creative medium. But now that's being severed. Now you're having like an AI, a robot at the other end. What does that mean to it for us spiritually, creatively, that we're not having these human transmissions anymore, that they are potentially like, artificially based? So going back to the universe of Dune, and it's this really complex world of like human and political interaction, sort of spirituality, theology, prophecy, sort of technology. And there's a part of the aspects not in the films at the moment, because it's kind of happened in the past, but apparently they had a whole AI war. It's a thinking machine war. It was universally banned because they had this big war called the Butler Jihad. And it basically, what was happening is that humanity was on the pursuit of technological supremacy, and humanity started to create these sentient machines. And this opened doors for men with machines to then enslave other men. So this is what started this whole conflict, was basically trying to grasp back power from these machines that were becoming far more superior than the average human. And this is what then elicited a universal ban on computing technology. And then now you sort of read about the Dune story now, it's really fascinating. The whole Imperium, they have more of a mindful relationship with technology. They demand that there's a human oversight, judgment over these machines to make sure that never happens again. So personally, I think these are huge lessons and huge concepts that humanity needs to think on deeply. And people will say, no, it's just fiction, it's just sci-fi. But no, I think these are concepts that have been thought about subconsciously. And, I think they're really important to kind of consider. So I hope people do. But I just find the Dune universe really fascinating, in its complexity and some of these ideas that are spilling out into the collective consciousness, especially because of these amazing films that have been created. I rewatched Dune 1 the other day, and you do notice, because I'm going to go to the cinema to see the second one soon, so I just want to reacquaint myself with the story again. And you notice that all the technology, there's no complex computers or computer screens. A lot of the ships that they're piloted, they just have like controls, buttons and switches. There's no computer screens at all. So it really kind of comes through in some of the props and some of the, the visual assets of the film. They're really sort of taking this non-AI, non-thinking machine mentality. Another notable aspect of the Dune universe as well is the real fusion with technology and consciousness and spirituality. It's all on show. It's a place that I hope, humanity at the moment should be moving towards. I'm not talking from the point of view of like an imperium, like an overarching hierarchical system like that, but it's just this mindfulness of the environment, especially with the Fremen. They have this real reverence to the area they live in. They have all these quite sophisticated technologies in terms of what they call the still suits which they wear, which prevents them from losing any moisture, and they can just recycle the liquid within their bodies, and it's powered by the movement of the suit itself. So also the Bene Gesserit, who are this female-led kind of sect who seem to control the Imperium from the background. They seem to work in generations over hundreds of years, planning. They're sort of trying to cross bloodlines to create the Messiah, and also they have this mind control mechanism, the audio neural control mechanism, where they can basically speak and mind control people in this very, very deep mystical voice. It's quite mad, but yeah, this goes to show the sort of the mystical spiritual element of kind of Dune. It's not just about technology. There's a real spiritual underpinning to the whole story. But it just feels like within our own society, we're too focused on technology. It's becoming this new religion in a way. People maybe are atheistic or maybe agnostic, are sort of making technology in a way their new god, and it's kind of leading, their development. And I would sort of argue that's a bad thing, because you're losing your humanity, you're sort of losing your connection to nature. I think that's like a real massive concern. And again, although there's all this oppression within Dune, they have this more of a balance between technology and spirituality that's kind of really playing out. And for myself, I think, in all honesty, I feel really apprehensive, like I said, about AI. It's incredibly powerful. I'm in awe of what it can do already over a very short period of time. But there have been some people who theorize, and I kind of agree with some of these ideas, that maybe there's alien AI that's already existed that, is essentially pushing humanity in a certain direction and maybe creating a negative influence. And you got to think of like, what is this huge drive towards technology now? Is this purely a human-driven thing? Is something artificial pushing this? And then going back to the idea of remote viewing and the Farsight Institute, they've done a lot of remote viewing on various political leaders in the public eye, and they sort of try and decipher how much of their mind is manipulated, how much is manipulated potentially by ETs, how much is it kind of compromised by illness? Maybe they're taking antidepressants. I don't know. But another aspect to their research that they try and see the artificial influence. And a lot of these global leaders seem to have a high artificial AI influence on their minds, according to these remote viewers. And again, it just plays into that concept to you. Maybe there is like an AI that's really sophisticated that we can't even fathom, that is not being created by humans, that is in some way manipulating us. I mean, it's a scary concept, but I think it, gives credence to maybe think about it. And Dune's not the only sci-fi that I've been watching recently. There's a really good series on Apple TV called The Foundation. And again, this is written by another prolific sci-fi writer. Again, I'm not really a fiction reader. So yeah, apparently it's written by a guy called Isaac Asimov. And he started writing these in the 1950s. And I think originally they were just kind of separate books, but they were kind of talked about a broader universe. But it was only towards the end of his life he started to write stories that kind of connected all these other earlier books up together to kind of create this, varied story landscape. But yeah, it's very much sci-fi based, humans implementing really sophisticated technology. As I said, I haven't really read the book, so all I've got to go on is what's in the program in the series, which has been really good. I think it's on series 2. I think series 3 is in the pipeline. But yeah, it's really alluding to more AI stuff like robot wars. They had a huge war which led to the destruction of robots because they were taking over. So, unilaterally kind of thinking machines, AI robots have been banned. But actually there's only one robot in existence, and he's actually held by the emperor. And it's this female. So visually you just think it was a lady, but actually she's a robot, but no one else knows. It's kind of secret information. But again, very much the robots within that universe have been completely banned for the same reasons that Dune banned them as well. But yes, it's safe to say I'm a little bit scared about AI. I'm on LinkedIn as well for my job. Going LinkedIn, helps me sometimes find work, connect with various recruiters because I'm freelance. So it's important. I hate being on it, but yeah, reluctantly on it. But, I see people posting about AI all the time and stuff and how amazing it is. But I never see any conversations on the paradigm shift that's going to occur, in terms of the employment as well, especially within the creative sector, just because, we're going into sort of really quite severe economic downturn, I think. And I know a lot of technology companies at the moment are just doing huge layoffs at the moment. You have a lot of these tech billionaires are selling their stock as well. So obviously there's going to be some kind of crash coming up. So jobs market at the moment is really, really dippy. It's really up and down. It's in the doldrums. And I think it's probably going to get worse. And I would argue that actually these AI tools are going to be used even more, just because, we can, rather than pay for an actual person, because that costs a lot of money, we can just use a robot to create this. It's going to affect everything, especially in the creative. I mean, the video is so good. Live action video just looks the same as reality. So, you're already losing camera people, editors, copywriters. I mean, in terms of what I work with in web technologies, UX designers, UI designers, all of these jobs are on the line, let alone things like project management, recruitment itself. I started to hear stories about companies actually during the recruitment process, people having strange telephone interviews with AI on the telephone. And that's one of the first steps before you even talk to a human. So yeah, I mean, the seismic shift within the employment industry is going to be massive. And no one ever talks about that. It's just constant platitudes about how it's amazing. And it is amazing, but it's going to be really deeply disruptive. And I hate that word when people talk about disruption in commerce. I find it really irritating, but it will be really disruptive. So yeah, there's a lot to kind of think about. Maybe there's a way that humanity can navigate this and come out, with AI really benefiting, but I think there's going to be a lot of knocks and scrapes on the way. Wow, what a ride. We started with the Cheshire Cat and ended with alien AI. So you can catch me on all major podcast platforms, on YouTube, on Rumble, on Odyssey. You can also go to my website, reconsidersimon.com. I love doing these. Thank you so much. I hope I can keep churning out the content as much as I can. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me again. Have a good evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you later. Take care. Bye-bye.